Hello, this is Abdullah Samir, and I'm going to be talking about the punishment of adultery in Islam. After doing research on infidelity and adultery in Islam, I've come to a conclusion that it's not an effective punishment, and it's detrimental actually to society. Instead of remedying the issue of, like adultery, it actually ends up killing people unnecessarily without addressing the root cause. Now, what is the punishment for adultery in Islam? The punishment for adultery is actually stoning to death. So if someone actually admits that they committed adultery, or there's 4 witnesses of intercourse, they are actually killed. Now, I believe that religion should not dictate legal punishment for crimes. This actually makes the religion and the laws very rigid, and it doesn't allow the state to grow and learn based on human psychology. And by dictating specific punishments for crimes such as chopping off the hand for stealing or stoning for adultery, it's actually doing an injustice to the world. This is because as we get more educated and we learn more about human psychology, we can find better ways to reform people, not necessarily by using these harsh methods that back then we didn't know any better, but now we actually have much better methods of repairing people. An evidence-based system to reform criminals is far better to a black and white, cut and dry rule book set out centuries ago. Now, where does the idea of stoning the adulterer to death come from? It comes from a hadith in Sahih Muslim, and to summarize, there was a lady that came and she admitted that she committed adultery, and she told the Prophet to purify her. The next day she came and the Prophet told her and then she turned away from the Prophet, and the Prophet said, and she came back and she said, why do you turn me away? And then she said, I even have evidence that, I'm pregnant. And then the Prophet said, just come back after you've given birth. I mean, after she gave birth, she showed the child to the Prophet, and the Prophet said, go back and wean her. I mean, like feed the baby for two years. And then, when the baby came, finally, the Prophet said, gave the child to one of his companions, and pronounced the punishment of zina upon her. She was placed in a ditch that came up to her chest, and he commanded the people to come forth and stone her. Khalid bin Walid flung a stone at her head, which blood spurted forth and splashed his face. Furious, Khalid verbally abused her. Rasulullah heard Khalid's curses and rebuked him, saying, Khalid, be gentle. By him in whose hand is my life, she has made such a repentance that even a wrongful tax collector would have been forgiven. And this is recorded in Sahih Muslim. This is the second time I'm recording this video. The first time I recorded it, I almost started crying because it was so emotional to me that this lady that was, she had a good heart, she was repentant, she felt bad for what she did, she betrayed the trust of her husband and she cheated on him. She was actually, killed for this. Her son or daughter would be left without a mother now. And this lady that actually, she could have been taught, a better way of living, was actually killed, and only because she was honest. It's like you take the best people that are the most honest people, and you kill them. Now, where did these rules come from? There's a hadith recorded in Sahih Muslim that a companion, Sa'd ibn Ubadah, said, if I were to see a man with my wife, meaning, like doing it, I would have struck him with the sword and not with the flat side of it, meaning the sharp side. When Allah's Messenger heard of that, he said, are you surprised at Sa'd's jealousy or his honor, like his ghira, as it's called in Arabic? By Allah, I am more jealous of my honor than him, meaning he has more ghira than Sa'd, and Allah is more jealous than I. Because of his jealousy, Allah has prohibited abomination, both open and secret. Abomination here is basically fasad, like illegal sexual intercourse. And no person is more jealous of his honor than Allah. And the hadith goes on. So we see here that Prophet Muhammad himself, the one that was coming with this legislation, or was claiming to come with the book from Allah, was very jealous himself. And in fact, even his wives, for example, if you look at Aisha, she was married at the age of 9. Marriage was consummated at 12, and when Prophet Muhammad died, she was only 20, and she had to live another 43 years of her life without a husband, because Prophet Muhammad didn't want any other man to be with her. He was that jealous and possessive of his wives. So we see here a little bit of the idea of where these things are coming from. You know, it used to very much anger these people that anyone, you know, this thing could happen. And I'm sure it angers people even today. But I don't know if it angers people to the point where you'd want to, like, you know, kill your, basically, or you'd want your spouse to be killed. The death penalty for adultery doesn't reduce infidelity because it doesn't address the root cause. For example, why is it that we should kill someone when actually they may have had, you know, a rough childhood? They may have had actual issues that actually led them to commit, you know, adultery. And by doing my research and by reading these two books, I've actually found this to be the case. You know, coming from a Muslim background, I always thought that adultery was the worst thing that can ever happen to a couple, and that was it. But I was surprised to find that many couples actually repair their relationships and have much happier relationships even after the adultery. You know, a lot of times there's some unresolved childhood matter that happens, and by going to therapy, they can find the issue and they can resolve it, and then they have a much happier marriage, believe it or not. There's two interesting books I read. One of them is called The Truth by a fellow called Neil Strauss. And this guy, he had to dig very deep into his soul and his heart, and he had to, you know, struggle to try to find out why it is that he continued to have relationship issues. He had a wonderful girl that wanted to be with him, yet he couldn't get intimate with her. He kept, you know, moving, getting a distance and going with other women. And you know, through this struggle, he managed to find out that he had an issue from his childhood with his mother, and the way his mother was treating him. She was doing what's called emotional incest, meaning she was treating him like her husband, and she was, you know, putting a lot of burden on him, and, you know, not allowing him to, you know, go with other, you know, to grow up as a child properly. And once he found this problem, he became happy with one woman. But before that, he had troubles to be intimate with one lady. There's another fantastic book written by a psychologist and therapist called After the Affair, which I've read, and I found that many people that cheat had actually had troubled and dysfunctional childhoods. They don't even realize it, you know? They don't even realize that the way that the relationship was with their parents actually led them to have these issues. And it's not, we can't really say that anyone else can take the blame for, you know, someone cheating on the, you know, another person, but we can actually try to discover the reasons for this and to help these people. Dr. Janice Dr. Janice is the one who wrote that book After the Affair, and she tells the story of many couples that have rehabilitated their marriage and have, after finding out, you know, the childhood issues that led them to have affairs in the first place. You know, some people, they actually have an affair in a way of kind of evening the score. You know, let's say, you know, they had a father or mother that was abusive to them, and or was emotionally distant. For example, you know, she gives the example of Jane, who had an alcoholic father and that was very distant, and, you know, she, for 17 years, and, you know, writing letters, her father would not come and be part of her life. And what happened was, you know, without even realizing, she ended up marrying a man that was an emotional iceberg, meaning just like her father, very distant. Because, you know, sometimes you feel comfortable with the type of relationship that you've been in, not because it's good for you, but because it feels comfortable, you know. So she went with this man that, you know, didn't give her any love, didn't give her any sort of, you know, like intimacy, and instead she ended up cheating on him, basically. Now, what happens is, this is one way of getting revenge, you know, we subconsciously try to get revenge on the, you know, let's say it was a parent that abused you, a father that didn't want to see you. So when you end up in this type of relationship again, in order to try to punish, you know, your father that is no longer there, you try to reenact this, and this happens all subconsciously in the back of our minds. You know, an affair can also be an act of rebellion, a way of declaring independence from relationships, you know, in a sense that if you grew up in a home without any proper boundaries, where you were not taught, you know, how to say no, proper boundaries, you know, keeping this, how to become healthy emotionally, you know, some parents, they suffocate their children and they keep them too close, they don't allow them to grow and to thrive and to become adults, you know. And what happens is, when they grow up, they don't understand these things, and they have, you know, bad relationships. For For example, you know, in the book, after the affair, she gives the example of David, who grew up again without a father. His mother was a Holocaust survivor, and because she was scared of losing him, she wouldn't let him have any friends. She would walk him to school every day. She would keep him very, very close, but she would smother him. And what happened is, when he grew up, he ended up marrying a lady, Muriel, who was just like his mother, who was very, very needy, you know. And what happened was, she was so needy and so, you know, demanding on him, that he felt very resentful and cramped, and eventually he had an affair, and it became apparent that he actually had kind of married his mother in a sense, and he was, you know, trying to deal with the stress of this thing, and this is what happened, you know. And sometimes these things, through years of therapy, sometimes takes years of therapy to find out that the reason why you have this dysfunctional relationship is because of what happened to you as a child, and people don't see these things. Now imagine, you know, killing these people, you know, stoning them to death. Like, is this better thing to do, or is it better to reform these people and to help them and to give them treatment, you know? Like in the example of Prophet Muhammad killing that lady, she was actually remorseful for what she did, and she admitted it. She was, you know, a good person, and it's sad that someone like that should be killed in the most gruesome, brutal way. And you know, this is something that some people want to bring back. They think that this is the best way to live, and this hudud punishments, these capital crimes, that these are good for humanity, but they're not good for humanity. And let's look at another thing that's very unfair in Islam. How is it that a man can go behind his wife's back and get married again, and this wouldn't be considered adultery? He can actually go and have another wife and have sex with her, and this would not be considered cheating. This would be considered dishonesty, but this would not be adultery. But if she did that, she went and got married behind his back, she would be stoned to death. So how is it, you know, that this is fair? It doesn't seem fair, does it? You know, on one popular Islamic fatwa site, it says, no evidence appears either in the Quran nor Sunnah requiring the permission of the first wife if her husband wishes to marry another wife, and therefore he is not required to ask her permission. Now, isn't this kind of like, you know, not so nice? So in conclusion, you know, the punishment for adultery in Islam is excessive and is harmful to humanity. Many of these couples have children together. You know, why take away one of the parents and ruin a perfectly good family that can actually be fixed, you know? Sometimes it can't be fixed, and, you know, people need to go their own ways. But at the same time, do you need to kill the person? You know, is it fair that men can get married a second time, you know, without actually the wife's involvement, and women cannot get married without the husband's involvement? And finally, you know, what is best? Evidence-based legislation, you know, a rule of law based on, you know, things that we can learn from, or being stuck in time in, you know, in the 7th century, in a place and time where everything was different from today. And, you know, how can we say that this literally makes sense in today's day and time? Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, you know, please subscribe and keep in touch on Facebook or Twitter or on my blog. Thank you very much. Bye.